Hello, thank you for joining me this morning or whenever it is during the day that you might be looking at this. My name is David Goldsmore. I'm a local preacher in training in Ilkley in West Yorkshire in Christchurch, which is a combination of Methodist and United Reformed Church. So as I say, thank you for joining me this morning. This morning, we're embarking in Christchurch on a prolonged period of looking at the Gospel of Matthew. And we're starting with perhaps a rather challenging story in the Gospel of Matthew that concerns an interaction between Jesus and a woman from the land of Canaan. But we'll come to the story in a little while. Firstly, I just want to reflect that if we think about the situation that we have in our country and in the world, there seems to be a bit of a theme of polarization, perhaps. A theme of who's in and who's out, certainly internationally, with some countries apparently drawing up their borders and keeping people out. A theme of who belongs and who doesn't, who's in the team and who isn't. And I just reflect on this because the story that we're looking at is really the opposite. It's a story of perhaps rather radical inclusiveness. So if we keep that in mind. So the story is in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 15, from verses 21 to 28. And in this story, Jesus has gone to two cities called Tyre and Sidon, cities today in the land of Lebanon. And we would all wish to pray for the benighted citizens, particularly of Beirut in that country. So he's gone to this land. But the context is, in the previous verses in the chapter, he's been having, I think it'd be reasonable to say, a bit of a barney with the religious authorities about their insistence on observing ritual ways, including ritual ways of washing before eating. And Jesus makes it quite plain to them that it's not how you behave in a ritual way that is important. It's what comes out of your mouth, that comes from your heart and your soul, that is important. And in a very real way, that sets the scene for what happens when he goes to Tyre and Sidon. So the situation is that the Canaanite woman, she appeals to Jesus. She appeals to him because she has a daughter who she described as being possessed by a demon, so today who is having mental health problems. Now Jesus appears to ignore her to start with, which seems a bit odd. And he then appears to engage in, it sounds like rather aggressive banter. Talks about you don't give the food to the children, or rather you do give the food to the children, not to the dogs. And that is a derogatory remark we'll perhaps think about shortly. But the woman persists in asking Jesus for help, persists and perhaps, you might argue, gives as good as she gets by responding to what Jesus said to her. And Jesus is, it would appear, mightily impressed by this because he admires her level of faith and he makes sure that her daughter becomes well. So the context of this is important, I think, for then and I think for now. Because Matthew was writing for what we describe as a largely Jewish Christian audience. And they would appreciate the sharpness of this interaction, this verbal interaction between Jesus and the woman. Because that was part of the religious culture of the time. Perhaps it should be more part of our religious culture now. And so the Canaanite woman is commended because the depth of her need for her suffering daughter is greater than any possibility that she might take offense Now she is acutely aware as a non-Jew, as a Gentile, acutely aware that she may not deserve anything at all in the religious culture of the time, but she is not going to give up. And Matthew tells this story to strengthen faith. Don't take offense. Don't give up if you think you're being ignored. Don't give up when others try to put you off. And don't take no for an answer. So the woman knew Jesus' reputation. She knew that he could heal her daughter if only he would. And through the strength of faith that she demonstrated, he did. Now, what might look almost like a racist encounter here, calling the Canaanites dogs, and this was a common derogatory term that the Jews used for non-Jewish people, for Gentiles, such as the Canaanites. But that is turned around. It's turned around in this story. And what is also turned around, that perhaps would be against expectations, is that in a society at that time where women didn't speak to men, a woman is heard. Not only a woman, but a foreign woman is heard, who had the apparent temerity to speak to Jesus, and as a result had been offered salvation for her daughter, and perhaps also for herself. So what this story shows is that then, as now, that the gospel, the story of the good news of Jesus, is for everybody. It's an inclusive and all-encompassing story. And what this particular story also shows is that despite some of the cultural attitudes of the time, women matter. This Canaanite woman is one of us, and we are one with her. A powerful message from all those years ago. So what of the context of this story now? Well, in a world where inclusiveness is perhaps challenged, we see it not just abroad. We must make sure that we see it where it raises its head in this country, in our country, locally, nationally, that the inclusiveness of the offer of the love of God through Jesus is very much for everybody. Now this story, or this theme rather, goes through the chapter in Matthew that we are reading from today. And that theme of inclusiveness, of bringing people together, surely must and should go through our lives today. So I would close with a prayer, or speaking a prayer. It's a prayer from the Iona community, very much a community centered on the concept of social justice through Christian faith. And this prayer was read by, or rather was written by, Tom Schumann from the United States. It's from a collection called 50 New Prayers from the Iona Community. It's called Wide Enough. God of aliens and strangers, make the doors of our homes wide enough so all find a home. God of the near and far off, make our hearts wide enough so all might find a friend. God of saints and sinners, open our arms wide enough so all, the politician, the homeless, the neighbour, the guest, the child, the widow, all may be wrapped in your grace. Amen. And thank you again for joining me.